There you go. There you go. And now we're both doing both. So thank you. Thank you. I got lots of help here, both for spiritual matters and for technical matters. So you're in good hands. But welcome to User's Guide for the Soul. I'm glad you're joining us. And you can, of course, as always, leave comments on Facebook. I'll be checking on my phone here as we learn. So please feel free to join the class in real time with any questions. Write in the comments under the class. Comments go here. We are in chapter 36 of the Tanya, which is, the Tanya is one of the key texts in Hasidus. It's considered the written Torah of Hasidus, certainly of Chabad Hasidus, and how that illuminates Kabbalah. And in Chabad Hasidus, it is considered the core chapter of the approach of Chabad Hasidus. And it explains so many of the things that represent this approach to Kabbalah, and so many things about why that's transformed really all of Judaism in the 20th century and even today. So it's a very powerful chapter, and also it gives an anchor and a compass bearing for any of us on a spiritual path to get a sense of what it's all about, of what should motivate us, why I'm here, what is the name of the game that we're all playing here, being a body and a soul and trying to operate at our best. Lots of cultures give lots of answers. I think this is the most profound I've encountered. And like so many things that are profound, it's hiding in plain sight in Judaism. It's all about making a dira b'tachtonim, a home for God in the lowest aspect of creation, specifically by physical action. And that's why Judaism is so centered on physical action. And to catch you up, if you're joining in chapter 35, we learned all about the image of a lamp filled with oil with a flame on top. And what is it that allows the light of the Shekhinah, God's presence, to dwell over my head, so to speak, above my consciousness, surrounding me? That is the physical mitzvahs that I do. That's the oil that feeds the wick that is my body and my animal soul. That oil is the physical mitzvahs we do because they are completely surrendered to God. They're nullified. And it's that sense of self-nullification, of surrender, that makes something holy. Because if something is not surrendered, if it has an identity, that means there's not just God. And that's the opposite of holiness. That's klipa. That is ego, call it. Not necessarily evil, but it's not just God. It's not just God's oneness. If something is completely surrendered and nullified, it's transparent, it's part of God's oneness, now that can be holy. So it's only the mitzvahs, the physical mitzvahs, that are just like no will of their own, just completely represent God's will with nothing hidden, and they can be the oil that allows God's presence to dwell. In chapter 36, we're going chunking up and saying, okay, that's great. We would all love the Shekhinah to dwell above our heads, but why? Why? Maybe just learn Torah and have that oneness, right? And so now he's giving us really a worldview of what is the purpose of each of our lives, what is the purpose of the world, and how it connects to the power of each of these mitzvahs, and how it gives us a free pass to the infinite. So we said it's a well-known statement that the world was created, so God should have a dira b'tachtonim. We're now recapping 36. A dira means a dwelling place, and b'tachtonim means in the lowest levels. And the Alter Rebbe explained that being the purpose of life makes us realize God didn't create the entire levels of reality that are described in Kabbalah for the higher levels in the angels, as much as we think those are beautiful and mystical and wonderful and beyond us. For God, they're just a degradation of the Ein Sof's light. It's just that light blocked, and then there's a bad photocopy of it. And why would God, if God wanted more holiness, create a world that was less evident, right? There was less holiness, that light was blocked. So it's not for any of the spiritual worlds that creation was made, but rather only when we get to the very bottom of creation, and God has blocked so much of the light of the Ein Sof that there's genuinely nothing left. You have a world that really looks like there's no divinity whatsoever, nothing connects it to God, there's no godliness apparent in it. It's only there where you have anything novel, anything new, anything that wasn't just a worse copy of what was above it. And it's here, in complete darkness, in the lowest aspect of reality, that's where God wanted to have a home. And in fact, that's where God's home was originally. When originally God created the world, this was God's garden here in the physical world, not in the spiritual worlds. It was a garden where God said, you know, I've come to my garden to relax, to enjoy. It's my home, to be myself. And it was here that God's presence was originally, and it was, as we learn in other texts, it chased out of reality step by step and then brought back down and then chased out again. And it's our job to make a home for God here in the lowest reality. And that really is the purpose of creation. And that's the only thing that creates something new that God thought of before creation happened to begin with. Because there's nothing new. There's no pleasure for God in creating a home for God in Atzilus, in the highest spiritual world, or one of the other spiritual worlds. It's only here where we have free will, and we can say, no, looks like there's no God, I'm going to act like there's no God. And then we change our minds and we say, no, I'm going to invite God in here into my mind and my heart and my environment. And there, that gives God a big, there you go. That's why I created this whole thing, all of the worlds. It's a very powerful insight. And what it does is it actually turns perhaps our instincts upside down, because I think what makes me special is my divine soul, as I've learned, is my connection to God, as I've learned, is my my higher, you know, my noble side that wants to help other people, that wants to learn, that wants to grow. Isn't that what makes me special? The Alter Rebbe is saying just the opposite. You think the dark side of your mind and your heart is not special? You think you just want to, you know, you wish that wasn't there. You wish you didn't have to contend with your animal soul. That's exactly what makes you special. Because it's there that God created the world to make a home, in the lowest aspect of reality. And where is it that is the lowest aspect of reality in your life? It's your darker side. It's your negative habits. And your divine soul couldn't actually do this for God, couldn't make a home in the physical world without your animal soul and your physical body to actually connect to the physical mitzvahs for it. So in fact, the body and the animal soul are the key piece, are the things that make us most special, not the divine soul. Of course, we have to do our work and refine them and struggle with them, but we shouldn't feel like, oh, you know, I have this narishkeit, I have these habits, and so I'm worth less. That makes me more dear, more precious to God. Any questions about that before we dive into our text on page 488? Hey, let's see, any text? Oh, okay, we got good morning. Hi, Jeff. Hi, Janae. Okay, let me know if any questions. We're watching. All right, we're going to start on page 488 at the top. Second paragraph. Shekach ala birtzono yitbarech liot nachas ruach lefanav yitbarech kad itkafya sitra achra vitapech chashocha linhora.
Thus, the purpose of the Hishtalshalut is this world, for such was his will, that he find it pleasurable when the Sitra Achra is subjugated to holiness and the darkness of Kalipa is transformed into holy light.
So that doesn't happen anywhere else. In the spiritual worlds, every angel, every phenomenon knows what created it and does exactly what God wants, and there's no struggle. I mean, there's contrast, right? There is good and evil because of our actions here, but it's only here that we can actually subjugate the klipa and we can struggle with something, because it's only us that have the free will to not simply follow God's will like an angel. So we are really the catalyst in this whole thing. We're the only piece in creation that can do what it was that God had in mind when God created reality. And that is struggle with my dark side, transform it, and give God the pleasure that was why God started way back and made the Big Bang, however you picture it. Isn't that powerful? Isn't that amazing?
Amazing.
Amazing. Sheyair or Hashem ein sof baruch hu bimkom hachoshech v'asitra achra shel kol olam hazeh kulo.
So that in the place of the darkness and Sitra Achra prevailing throughout this world, the Ein Sof light of God will shine forth.
And by the way, the light itself, as it travels down through the spiritual world, is degraded and degraded and degraded. So it's just, you're just losing light. So if you think, well, God must have had in mind the spiritual worlds and we're just below that, but we're not the point. Well, there's no new light there. The only new light that really happens is light that comes out of darkness. That's a novelty in reality. So the light that's up in the heavenly worlds, although there's more godliness there, that's just God hiding more and more. It's only here in my life, in your life, when we're in the darkness of not even perceiving godliness, and we do it anyways, and we struggle with ourselves, and we refine the world in ourselves, now a new light is created, and that is the first new thing that ever happened since God said, let there be light. Right? That light that God created was just a bad photocopy. The only new light that ever happens is right now, you and I, when we struggle and refine ourselves and do the right thing and do a mitzvah instead of giving in to ourselves. It's the only new thing in creation. God goes, ah, that, now you got it. Yeah, Rick, you got a question?
I don't understand what you're trying to get across to us here.
About the new light?
Yeah. Can you go over that again?
Yeah, the Alter Rebbe is saying, in place of the darkness and the Sitra Achra, God's light will shine forth. So, you know, I'm out there working, I'm earning money, maybe I'm self-centered, it's a dog-eat-dog world, I'm fighting with other people to earn the money, and it's just full of ego. Then I take $10 and I put it in a tzedakah box, and suddenly in that darkness of everyone out for themselves and no one sees that there's any godliness there, in this dark world that we're in, the physical world, we put money in a tzedakah box, we create a light, and that's the only light created in reality that wasn't automatic, because all the light in the spiritual world is automatic. The angels know what to do. And B, it's the only light that isn't just a dimmer version of the light that was above it. Right? Because all that light was dimmed out till there's nothing left in this world. And we have free will, so we could just live for ourselves. So when an angel does something and spiritual light flows out of that, that's just a dimmer light than the light that was creating that angel. That's just a screen on the light. It's less light and it's not new light. When we put that money in the tzedakah box, no one is making us do that. That's of our own volition. That's something brand new. And it's not light that's coming from a greater light. It's light that's coming out of darkness, which is a new thing. It's fine. If I got a great beam of light and I shade it and shade it and shade it until now you get it and it doesn't blind you, it's not new light. I'm here with, if I'm the original light, that's not impressive to me that I blocked so much light that I could get to you. What's interesting is now if there's total darkness and now that darkness creates its own light, that's a new thing. A little bit more? Yeah?
In other words, we turned up the wattage when you do something, a mitzvah. Do something good. You go from a 60-watt bulb to a 75-watt bulb.
Well, I wouldn't even think of it as like going backwards and getting back to the brighter light, because it really is something, it's a new quality. It's more like, you know, when you were a kid and you got those glow-in-the-dark toys we used to have? Maybe it was, I don't know what generations those are all in, but they were the rage when I was 8, man. You got those glow-in-the-dark things. And you go into a closet and shut the door because it's so cool to look at it in complete darkness. You can see the real light of it. Now it's a dim light. It's not a very impressive light, right? But there's just something super special about when you're in the dark, now you hold your hands over and you go, oh, and everybody's like, oh my God, that's so cool, right? It's not cool because the light is exceptional. It's cool because you're in the darkness and it's creating its own new light, right? So it's not even that you're turning the wattage back up. It's that you're generating your own light of a different quality because it's coming out of the darkness of the physical world. Get it?
Yeah.
It's not exactly the Alter Rebbe's point, but it's very, very tied to the Alter Rebbe's point. He's talking about it here. V'yeter se'ed v'yeter oz v'yitron or min ha'choshech me'ha'arato be'olamot elyonim.
With greater strength and intensity, and with the superior quality of light that emerges from the darkness. That is, when darkness is transformed into light, the resulting light is superior to ordinary light. It will thus shine with greater intensity than its radiance in the higher worlds.
Okay, I'm trying something new on Facebook. We got a few people. Hi, Leon. It's a pleasure to have you. Love your music. Love Jacob. He's awesome here at Temple. Hi to Eric. Hi to Paul. Hi to Jessica, a family member of mine watching. Hope you had a good Yontif. So we got a little crowd on Facebook. Leon, it said bring them on camera. I don't know what happened. I'm going to try this option. I'm going to bring you on camera on Facebook, okay? If you don't want, turn your camera off. It's a new experiment for me. I don't know how it works. So if you pop on there, let me know. Say hi, give a wave, sing us a song, something of your beautiful music, and let us know any thoughts or questions. Good to have a nice group there on Facebook. So this is what we're saying, with greater strength and intensity and with a greater quality, because it's coming out of the darkness. So the quality of the light in the spiritual worlds above, it's much brighter than anything we could be aware of here or anything we have normally in the world here. But the quality is so bright because it's coming from an infinite light, but it has to be dimmed and dimmed and dimmed. So it's not new. The light coming out of the darkness, that's a new thing, and it has a quality that no other light in the universe has. And it's that iskafe, it's that struggling and refining the lower world that makes a home for God. That is actually the purpose of why the world was created. Shema'ir sham al yedei levushim v'hester panim hamastirim uma'alimim or in sof baruchu. There.
There in the higher world, it shines through the garment and through the concealment of the countenance, a concealment of the, help me out.
Pnimius.
Internal aspect of the light, which conceals the screen of the screen of the Ein Sof's light.
And so yeah, there's beautiful godliness and light in the higher spiritual worlds, but it's coming through screens that are blocking it. And even more importantly, God's essence, not God's light, is completely blocked, is hidden. So
is this the same light that we talked about with the candle metaphor?
Yeah, I'd say the light of the Shekhinah is that light, is God's presence, yeah.
So it's the same light that we talked about with the candle metaphor. As you do more mitzvah, the lighter gets brighter. Yeah.
But the difference being what he's about to point out here is that in our case, we get the essence actually creating a light, and that is a different kind of light, right? So it's all Or Ein Sof, right? It's all God's light. But the difference he's bringing out here is in the spiritual worlds, you get more of the light because you're a spiritual being and you can deal with God's light, but you get none of the essence. God's face is actually hidden. So it's just light, and if they were to see God's essence for a moment, they would be completely nullified. All of heaven would be gone. All the angels would be gone. They can't deal with even a glimpse of God's essence. It's only down here where God has blocked everything to the extent that there's no light, that now God can bring God's essence down. And that is what makes this God's home. Because as we said last week, where is it that you express your essence in your life? What physical place are you so comfortable that you're just yourself with no shield, no mask? Where's that?
At home.
At home, right? That's what a home is. A home is a place where I can be completely myself, completely at ease, no mask. My essence is there. So when our tradition says God wanted a home in the physical world, in the lowest aspect of creation, they're not talking about just God's light. They're talking about God's absolute essence that we can pick up and deal with when we do a mitzvah, and the angels and all of heaven would be completely evaporated if they could encounter it even for a moment. So that's the difference, right? In the higher worlds, that essence, God's face, God's inwardness, is completely hidden even though there's a lot of light. Down here, where there's no light, God can actually reveal God's essence directly with nothing being hidden. How? As we learn, through a physical mitzvah where it's completely surrendered to God. It's just God's will. God's will being synonymous in this conversation with God's essence. Yeah, I might go slow in this chapter because it's Chris Wilson. You gotta be kidding me. Hey man, how you doing? Hi Paul. Oh, I miss you, man. There's an old friend of mine from musical theater. He actually got me my first professional musical theater job. Was Chris Wilson. He knew the directors, and I came to audition, and I actually saw him. Maybe I don't remember how I found out, but they asked about me. He gave me the thumbs up, and they hired me. So he's a real talent and a real beautiful soul. Welcome, Chris.
I got a Cantor.
Yes, Eleanor.
So my rewording what you said is that in the contest of getting closer to God, we are even going to beat the angels because we are going to see his essence as opposed to just a little light.
So you know, I think you're using angels in the colloquial sense of that we think angels are closer
In the
to
next
God.
world, right.
Yeah. So one thing that Kabbalah turns upside down, and this is good for everybody, is that as you go up into the spiritual worlds, we naturally think we're getting closer to God. We naturally think the higher I can elevate myself along the umbilical cord of my soul, the closer I am to God. In fact, God is just as hidden in the spiritual worlds as in the physical worlds. And, oh, wait, Paula. Hi, Paula. Sorry, Paula, we left you in the waiting room for a bit there. Welcome. But when I go up into spiritual worlds, Kabbalah says, sorry, you're no closer to God. God's infinitely away from everything, far from everything. There's more godliness in the spiritual worlds. There's more of God's light in the spiritual worlds. But God's light is not God any more than, you know, a beam of light on my hand is the sun, right? I'm not touching the sun. It's just light from the sun. So God is equally hidden in all the worlds, and it's only in the spiritual world, in the physical world. Sorry, Paula. Maya said you're waiting for some time, so I apologize. I didn't have my eye on the waiting room there, but welcome to the class. It's only here in the physical world that God's essence can actually come out and touch us and create a home for itself. Not even in the spiritual world. And the angels, it's just the opposite. The angels cannot touch God's essence. They can only be aware of God's light, which is not essence. So it's counterintuitive. It's upside down to what we'd imagine. Okay, you're on page 49. Shelo yibatlu b'mtziut. So at the worlds. Do we know who's reading? I lost track too. Oh, Cindy, you want to unmute? I don't know who's there on your screen.
It's Sue Ellen, I think.
No, Sue Ellen just read it. It's Eleanor's turn.
Okay, go ahead, Eleanor. You want to unmute again. Thanks.
So that the worlds do not dissolve out of existence. Should I continue?
Let's touch on that, right? Because that's actually what would happen if the essence that we can pick up and just, you know, light a Hanukkah candle on Hanukkah that's coming up now, and that's God's essence that we're touching and dealing with and revealing. If that was in any of the spiritual worlds for a moment, the way it is here in the lowest realms, they would dissolve. They'd be gone. That's you want to have that key in your mind for this to become the lens through which you see your whole Jewish practice. That you're picking up something that actually the angels can't get near. It's a special opportunity, and that's why the world, as we said, is here. And Eleanor wants you to do one more for this purpose.
For this purpose, the Holy One, blessed be He, gave Israel the Torah, which is called might and strength, for it gives us strength to receive such revelation without being overwhelmed by it. So,
a new idea here that I don't think we've seen in the Tanya. And as always, as you know, he's talking about mitzvahs, and then he's got to go back and talk about Torah. So, you know, that's typical of Hasidus also. And we also, as souls, once we leave the body and we're soul in heaven again, in our just natural state, we would just dissolve and become one with Ein Sof, and we'd have no identity again, and we'd be gone. We would have been a dream that passed, and there's nothing left, because we're just a part of God anyways. So back to the oneness, and now there's no me anymore. And that's what reality would be like for a soul if we were left in our pristine condition. It's only the fact that we come down here in a body and we're able to specifically now learn Torah, the Alter Rebbe is saying, that creates, sometimes it's described as garments for our soul that the soul can wear, like sunglasses and a sun hat, that now we can deal with the light of the Ein Sof as it is in heaven after we're done with our body. And now we can deal with it and still stay intact and see the beauty and the light of the Ein Sof from a soul perspective. But it's our Torah learning that creates those garments that let us tolerate the brightness and the power of the Or Ein Sof once we're back in heaven, God willing. And here he talks about it in terms of a few other images, might and strength. So of course, imagine the Torah, creating solidity in your soul's structure that it can now re-encounter the Or Ein Sof. And because of this Torah we're learning right now it's reinforced, it's vitamins for your soul, and your soul can now go back and it will withstand the tremendous divine energy of seeing godly light from a heavenly perspective. And in a moment, he's going to describe it to dew like that falls, that appears on the grass in the morning, right? That liquid. And that Torah is also described as dew, and that revives our souls. So there's something about learning Torah here that actually reinforces and creates a structure for our soul to now continue its journey at a much higher level after we're done in a life. And we see the opposite, what happens to a soul when it doesn't have that, with what happened at Sinai, right? Many of us know what happened at Sinai when God said, I am God, you'll have no other gods before me. What happened to all the Jews that were there at Sinai in that moment when they heard the words? Right, who could tell me? Noreen, I know you know.
What do you mean, what happened?
Oh, so what happened? We were all standing at Sinai. If you have long-term memory, you and I were there as souls, if not as bodies. And every person that was standing at Sinai, when they heard the first of the two commandments straight from God's mouth, not from Moshe, something happened to everyone in Israel after each of those statements. Do you know what it was? Anybody remember?
They
Right?
got scared. They got scared.
They're not just scared. They died. Their souls were blown out of their body several miles, and every person there died the moment they heard, I am God. Right? And then God brought their souls back into their bodies. God said, you'll have no other gods before me, and they died again. Brought them back. Don't build idols. They died again. And brought them back and finally said, hold on. Right? This is a bit much. Moshe, why don't you go talk to God, and you tell us what God says to you, and we'll just wait here. Okay? It's enough of the dying. But why was that? You think it's just a story to show the power of Torah. But why was that? It's because they had not learned Torah as a nation at that point. They had no Torah. They were slaves in Egypt. Torah hadn't been given. So they were just their natural souls. I won't use the word natural. They were their pristine souls without the additional strength of Torah learning. And so when God revealed God's essence, the same way we're talking about now, right? That was the one moment in history when God revealed God's essence just unilaterally without us doing a mitzvah to bring it in. So God's essence appeared for a moment when God said, I am God. And because we had no Torah learning to create these garments to withstand it, that was it. Our souls reverted to their part of the full oneness. We all died. Everyone was out of their body and did, and God had to revive them to hear the next thing God wanted to say. So now, after all our Torah learning, we'll be able to deal with having more of a conversation with God's light when we're in heaven, God willing, because we have all this Torah learning. Yeah? And page 490. וכמאמר רבותינו זיכרונם לברכה שהקדוש ברוך הוא נותן כוח בצדיקים לקבל שכרם לעתיד לבוא.
And as our rabbis say, that God gives tzaddikim the strength to receive their reward in the world to come.
That's another quote. He's going to back this up, that tzaddikim need strength. He called to our strength to receive their reward in the world to come. What's the reward in the world to come? It's just enjoying God's light. Seeing, oh, I made these connections, these moments of oneness, helping other people. That created this light. It brought light down from heaven, all the above. And now, when I'm out of a body, I can see the light, and it's the most beautiful thing. It's such a pleasure for a soul. But to actually withstand it, we need a certain strength, and that's why Torah is called Oz, strength. Shelo yitbatlu b'mtziut mamash be'or Hashem hanigle le'atid bli shum levush.
So that their existence should not dissolve within the divine light that will reveal itself in the hereafter without any garment.
Yeah, because that's what would happen. Even tzaddikim, if they didn't have the strength from learning Torah here in this world, that essential light from God that they see in heaven, that would dissolve them. And another quote here, K'dichtiv v'lo yikanef od morecha perush lo yitkasem mimcha b'chanaf levush v'yonecha ro'ot et morecha.
As it is written, and your teacher will no longer hide
Yikanef.
and that from you, meaning not as some interpret the verse, he will no longer withhold your reins, but following Rashi, he will no longer conceal himself from you with the edge of a robe or garment, and your eyes will behold your teacher.
Yes, I'm sorry I didn't research the original line here. I'm not sure about where the play on words in the rain piece comes in here. Maybe if someone online can look it up and let us know. Hi, Monica. My goodness, we've got a whole crowd today. Amazing. Welcome, guys. Welcome. Please, if you have any questions, go ahead, put them in the comments. Happy to bring your comments into class. But here Rashi says, the line, your teacher will no longer hide from you, is not as its literal meaning, God will withhold reins, but God won't conceal God's self with a robe or a garment. So God won't be hiding God's face the way it is now in reality, either in spiritual worlds or even here in normal life, but instead will be souls in heaven looking directly at the Or Ein Sof and withstanding it because of this strength of Torah learning. Uchtiv, another quote, Ki ayin be'ayin yeru v'gomer.
And it is also written, for they shall see eye to eye, meaning that the human eye will see as the divine eye sees. That is, we will clearly see the revelation of God's light.
And we'll get to seeing a little later in this chapter. But I love some of these lines from the Torah that you hear so many times. God won't hide God's face from you. You'll see God eye to eye, that we sometimes think of just as poetical statements. And really here the Alter Rebbe brings out, no, there's something that even the spiritual worlds is hidden from them, that we see, so to speak, when we're doing a mitzvah, that as a soul in heaven, now we're going to get direct perception of that. The light of that will be available to us, and it's the most, that's the reward of a mitzvah. And one more quote, Uchtiv v'lo yeh lecha od hashemesh le'or yomam v'gomer ki Hashem yeh lecha le'or olam v'gomer.
And it is further written, the sun shall no longer be the light by day, for God will be your eternal light.
So many beautiful lines from our tradition talking about what it will be like once we're done our journey in a body and we're back as a soul in heaven. But we need to have this strength from what we've done in learning together here in order to now really absorb and experience the true beauty and infinite nature of what we accomplished in a body. Yeah, so we're gonna go on to the next section of this chapter. There's kind of another topic is brought in here. So just any last questions from anybody, because I want us to really understand this, because this is a big part of what bolsters the practices we've been learning, the meditations, really trying to elevate our practice and elevate how we function as a soul in a body. And this is enough to inspire one for a whole life. We've seen, in the past century that this transforms all of Jewish culture, really, and many people transforms their lives entirely. This idea of dira b'tachtonim, that it's my lowest aspect that's the purpose of creation. It's my negative side that's the purpose of creation. When I struggle with that, I create a new light, and all this beauty is created. I bring God's essence into the world, and the Shekhinah dwells over my head in a way that can't happen even with angels. Right? We learned that. If an angel were to come into a room where 10 Jews are together, the Shekhinah dwelling over those 10 Jews would be so terrifying the angel would evaporate, would be obliterated. So to give you a sense of the power of what it is we're doing and the opportunity of being a soul in a body, something miraculous. Great. So let's go on to 491. Now, I know sometimes we in the Reform movement, we get a little nervous when someone brings up the Messianic era. I'm like, hold on, is that Judaism? I thought we forgot about that. I thought we moved away from that. So to be clear to all my Temple Israel friends, Reform Judaism embraces the Messianic era. I'll say that again. Reform Judaism fully embraces the concept of a Messianic era, that we should believe in a Messianic era, that we should work towards a Messianic era, and that the arc of history is heading towards a Messianic era. We have, in Reform Judaism, backed away from the figure of an individual Messiah. And by the way, a lot of people are queasy about that simply because there's been so many false messiahs in history, and the real, I don't think people understand the pain and chaos that some of these false messianic movements have caused. A Shabtai Tzvi took like a huge chunk of Eastern Europe, and they just traveled with them and gave up their lives, and then he just left them and converted out of Judaism. And it's hard to imagine the upheaval that did, that someone claimed to be a Messiah and then obviously wasn't. And so we're all, the Reform movement's rejection of a figure of Messiah, it's kind of understandable in the context of history. But for a purpose of our conversation, we should know that we as Reformed Jews, we do officially accept the concept of a Messianic era. We do need to work towards it, and we do see history as heading towards that the world is somehow being fixed. That's what Tikkun Olam means. And we're helping fix the world so that this Messianic era will arrive and all that entails. But what does the Messianic era really mean? I mean, if you ask a Reform Jew what it is the Reform movement believes in as the Messianic era and what's the point of it, what will they say? And even if you ask a traditional Jew, a Jew that's in yeshiva and living a very, very frum life, and you ask them, what's the purpose of Mashiach? What are they going to say? I'm not sure what the Reform answer would be because I haven't done a poll, but the traditional answer often has to do with something to do with reward. That Mashiach is about, we'll get a reward. I'm doing mitzvahs now and I'm suffering, and the Cossacks are kicking me out of my home and burning down my village, and I'm running and I'm suffering. Why is the world so bad? We believe Mashiach will come and we'll receive our reward. And in the world to come, I'm going to get light and goodness, and everyone's going to be healthy. There'll be no more war. We'll be able to learn Torah, and that's my reward. And it's about, I'm suffering in life to get a reward. The Alter Rebbe is going to give an entirely opposite definition of the Messianic era, and I think one that Reform Judaism would find to be very, very compelling and very, very in line with the way we practice Judaism. So this is such an interesting chapter to me to teach at Temple Israel. So we're on 491. V'noda sheyemot haMashiach u'bifrat ksheyichyu hametim. Usually means I talk too long if we're not sure who's going. Yeah? Okay.
It is known that the Messianic era, especially the period after the resurrection of the dead,
הם תכלית ושלמות בריאת עולם הזה שלכך נברא מתחילתו.
Is indeed the ultimate purpose and the fulfillment of the creation of this world. It is for this purpose that this world was originally created.
All right, so that's accepted. Why is the world created? For us to get to the Messianic era and get our reward, but hold on. Now we have a little note. Kabbalah schar ikaro, he's dealing with the idea of reward first. In the gray, the time.
The time, The time of receiving the reward is essentially in the 7th millennium, as is stated in Likutai Torah of the Arizal, Rabbi Yitzchak Luria of blessed memory, whereas the period until then constitutes the fulfillment of the world's purpose.
All right, so now he's distinguishing. Okay, we definitely have talked about receiving a reward in the Messianic era, but he says that happens starting at the 7th millennium, right? The year 6001, I guess, right? When the 7th millennium starts in the Jewish calendar. So we're now 5781, right? Yeah, so we got, someone do the math. Am I off? I think we are. Did I forget the year? Is it 5782 already? That'd be one. Okay. So we got 219 years left till we get to the 7th millennium, maybe 220 if we start at 1. And the 7th millennium, take a step back, how does Judaism see history? Because as North Americans, we've been taught that time goes infinitely backwards and infinitely forwards, and it's all the same. Every moment of time is the same. And we're just sort of on this existential point with infinite time that way, and what's at the end of infinite time, we don't know. And can you imagine time being infinite? No, but try and imagine it, right? So that's how many people were raised in North America, that time is just a constant line and it goes on forever both ways. Judaism sees time as a structure with a shape. So you got every week, and there's 6 days of a week, and then they all touch Shabbat. They're all circles around Shabbat, and that week has a structure, and Shabbat is the highest point of the week and the purpose of the week. And Shabbat reality goes to a higher level, and all the other days touch and flow into it, and it's like a flower with petals, right? And the same thing with groups of years, and the same thing with all of history. All of history is also 6 millennia, all touching a 7th millennia, which is the Shabbat of all time. There's the 7th millennia functions as a Shabbat for the other 6 millennia, and they all touch and flow into it. And something will change inherently about time, the same way when we go from Friday to Shabbat, something inherently changes about time and it's holier. Something will change inherently about history when we enter the 7th millennia. And that may sound like a fairy tale to some people. You say, well, how do you know? But that's how Judaism sees the world. And I don't know how we can prove or disprove one or the other. So I'm just putting it out there that Judaism does not see time as being the same all the way through. It sees it as being with a structure and finally flowing to something which is much more elevated. So that's the 7th millennia. In the 7th millennium, the Messianic era has to begin because that will be the nature of time and space at that point. The most obvious thing will be that there's only God, there's nothing else. That'll be our natural reality. And when we have to figure out if there's a physical world, yeah, it says in the Torah, God created a world, so there must be a physical world out there somewhere. But you got to really focus on it and meditate to recognize that you and I are separate and that you're one soul and I'm another soul. What'll be obvious to us will be just pure oneness, but still with the physical world somehow existing. That's the genius of it. Until then, we can get the Messianic era to start. And again, Judaism is working towards this, and Reform Judaism in particular. We can get it to start if we fix enough of the world ourselves, inside ourselves and around us. We can start the Messianic era early, and that's the purpose to which the world was created. And we'll get into what that is. But the period when we get a reward, that's the 7th millennium, that's after, because even the Messianic era has stages and periods. It comes out in a process. So he's distinguishing here, to button the point, he's distinguishing between the 7th millennium, which is the time of us receiving reward, but the time before that, when we bring the Messianic era, that's actually the purpose of why the world was created. And why? Let's look at it. As it is written.
No.
No.
We didn't do that, a glimmer of this revelation.
Oh, thank you. וגם כבר היה לעולמים אין זה בשעת מתן תורה.
A glimmer of his revelation, which will take place in the future, has already been experienced at the time of the giving of the Torah at Sinai.
All right, Kidiktiv, go ahead. As it is written.
As it is written, you, God, revealed yourself that we may know that God is the Lord. There is nothing else beside him.
So the thing that happened at Sinai, where God came down into the world, and God burst in and said, I made this world for me to have a home here, and I'm coming back. And Moshe helped bring God back. It happened for a moment, but we couldn't deal with it, so we were all destroyed and killed, and God brought us back. It happened for a moment. That's what's going to happen spiritually in the Messianic era. That'll be constant. That'll be all the time. And it can only happen down here in the physical world. Because what is Mashiach in the end? What is the Messianic era? It's not about me getting my compensation for having worked so hard and suffered so much. Not at all. That's a side effect. That's there. But what is it? This idea of God creating a dir b'tachtonim, a home in the lowest realm. What is the ultimate finale? What is the completion of that process? You and I can do it in our lives, and we can come here and learn Torah and create light and bring God's face here in a way that's subliminal for us, but it's real. We can go and do mitzvahs at Temple Israel, and we can bring God's essence there to Temple Israel, and we can take the physical reality around us and elevate it in that way. But that's just a personal thing. That's limited. What will be the final, the culmination, the absolute perfection of us creating a home for God in the lowest aspects? That's what the Messianic era is. That's when everything's done, the world passes a tipping point, and now it's completely, perfectly functioning as a home for God. And we're still here in physical bodies, and we're still here in the physical world, and yet the reality of Ein Od Milvado, there's nothing else beside God. It's all God and just unified, like the world wasn't even there, but it is. That's the plain nature and reality of the world now. So that's actually the purpose of why God created the world, because God wants an ultimate home. The ultimate home is when finally we fix the world to the point that God can come and live here, like at Sinai, in God's essence, completely revealed, but all the time. And with the physical world still here, all of us still in our bodies. And you can't imagine it, right? Because it's a different reality, but it's a total consciousness flip that we believe will happen in this time of the Messianic era. And I think as Reformed Jews, that's pretty cool, right? It means we have to go out, we have to fix everything wrong in the world, we have to address everything wrong within ourselves, we have to work with every other Jew and with every other nation and with every person in the world and refine everything and fix it to the point that all these social problems are gone, all the conflict is gone, and the spirituality that we crave is really, that's plain reality now. That's not just a glimpse or a moment in my life. I love that as a Reformed Jew. I'm curious your thoughts about that, because I know Messianic era is not something we bring up a lot around here. How does that land on you?
When you put it that way, it's very understandable, acceptable.
Yeah.
Because I for a lot of people, I think they figure, oh, there's going to be an individual, some person who's going to come and reveal himself.
Yeah.
So this way it takes that element out of it.
Absolutely, yeah. So I mean, I won't sugarcoat that side. Definitely, Maimonides' 30 Principles of Faith includes belief in a personal, individual, Messiah that will come and be part of the Messianic era. And definitely Reformed Judaism has backed away from that. And that's why, in classes, a lot of people kind of clam up when you bring up the Messianic era. But the Messianic era is Reform, right? Now, the idea of if there is or isn't a one individual Messianic figure, we actually don't need to resolve that to benefit from this, as you're saying, benefit from this viewpoint. Because we're focusing on, it's not about the one person, whoever that is, or whatever that means, right? What that might or might not look like. It's about the whole world. It's about the world being a home for God. That's the point of the Messianic era. So the historical argument, will or won't there be an individual figure? I mean, spiritually, if you're living in a time where your plain reality is that there's no distinction between any person, then really what difference does it make if there's an individual Messiah or there isn't an individual Messiah? There's no individual people. We're all just God. You know what I mean? So that the barriers between us that make up that question, who is the Messiah? Is there a Messiah? Those are gone. The nature has a different quality. So that's why I love this approach of looking at the Messianic era as being the point of existence and the ultimate home for God, and each of us does a little takes a step towards that when we do that in our lives. Is that kind of what you're saying, Dan?
Yes. Well, yes, exactly. After all, reflecting on Christianity, they believe Jesus is going to come back as the Messiah, or is the Messiah, and will return.
Yeah.
So I think that could be why we get a little bit hesitant talking about a messianic age.
Well, I don't know, because that's been the case for 2,000 years, and we've definitely kept the idea of a personal Messiah within Judaism. In fact, it was codified by Maimonides, centuries after the birth of Christianity. So I'm not sure that the reason why Reformed Judaism has backed away from that has to do with Christianity. Maybe North America a little bit, I don't know. But I mean, that's not the point of our class here. I don't think we should dwell on that. I get that that's not a Reform idea. I'll put it out, that's not a Reform idea at all. But I want to be clear, the Messianic era is at the heart of Reformed Judaism. And I think we can benefit and we can align ourselves in powerful ways with the concept of Messianic era, and through that work with the brilliance of this technique without getting caught up in is there a who, and who is the who? It's not a question I need to ask. Yeah.
Is the ultimate goal of Tikkun Olam to create this Messianic era?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's exactly it. So in Reformed Judaism, that is our stance, that the reason we repair the world is because we are working towards a Messianic era. And there's a difference between what's focused on and what's accepted. I get that. So we focus on the Tikkun Olam, but we don't focus on the Messianic era.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of like if I'm doing a job and I say I love my job, I don't know how much time we have. Well, let's finish with this. It's kind of like if I have a job and I say, I love my job, I love it so much, I don't need a reward, right? I don't need the Messianic era. I love fixing the world as a Reformed Jew. That's all. That's enough for me. Who needs a reward? It's more mature to just do the right thing without a sense of reward, right? Or fulfilling. I don't need the payoff. It sounds good and it sounds mature, but it's kind of like if I worked at a computer factory and I said, I love my job so much, I don't need to be paid. I just enjoy it. Okay, I get that. What if I said, I love my job so much, I don't even care if we make good computers. I just like putting the circuit boards together. I don't even care if what comes out the other end works. I want to do my job. Now you'd say, you lost yourself a little there. If you love your job is making computers, and you love that you made a computer, right? You're not so divorced from it that the whole point of what your work is not successful, right? If you love your job in the Apple store or in the Apple factory, that means you love making computers. You want to make sure it works. And it's the same thing here. As Reformed Jews, we love Tikkun Olam. Why? Because the world has to be fixed. That's good. But what does it mean when the world is ultimately fixed? That's the Reformed vision of a Messianic era, of a world where everything is spiritual, everything is aligned. Each one of us has done all of our work through generations and centuries. And if I don't, as a Reformed Jew, say, why am I doing Tikkun Olam? Why am I doing a mitzvah? Why am I learning Torah? To make a home for God in the lowest realm, which the completion of that is our Messianic era in Reformed Judaism. I'm like a person working on a computer that's like, I just love working on it. I don't care if it works at the end. So we want to connect it, and it gives power to connect it to say, I'm at a point in history, and there's an arc to history, and Reformed Judaism is part of that, and we are working towards the completion of it with everyone else, each in our own way. And that powers this moment in time when I'm learning Torah or doing a mitzvah or helping another person or just keeping myself from being negative and refining the world that way. There was one more question. I saw a hand that we didn't, who was that? Yeah. You'll want to unmute.
Yeah, so maybe you just explained it, because what I got hooked on was fix the world. So we're talking about fixing me, or I'm fixing me with all the studies. Is there something in an outreach that has to happen too, that other people other than our group have to be fixed? Is that part of what we're talking about?
Okay, so you actually brought 3 points up, right? So the first point is yes, Tikkun Olam, repairing the world in Kabbalah, is either fixing something in myself. So say I tend to lie in certain situations, tell stories. This year I'm not going to do that. I'm not saying that I do. I'm saying an example. Work on it, find a tool, find a mentor, repair my use of speech so that I'm honest and I don't tell stories. I fix something in myself. But now I can also, you know, instead of keeping all my money for myself, I can now give 10% to charity. You know, some to Temple Israel, some to another cause, whatever it might be. And now the physical world, my physical wealth, I'm also elevating that and fixing that. So the inner and the outer, they're both part of the same thing. When I fix within myself, it actually flows out and fixes my environment. And I'm responsible for everything within me. And divine providence says anything that I encounter, I have some responsibility for that. If I see something that needs fixing in the world, as Jews, we don't just turn away. We have to make a reasonable initiative. I don't have to finish the whole thing, but if it's in front of me, it means God needs me to be a partner and do something, whatever. But the question of should I fix other people, that's where we cross a little line, because all this work is meant to be for me, for myself. But it's not my job to look at my neighbor and say, they need to fix this or they need to fix that. That's their responsibility. So maybe just by example, I might be a help. And God forbid the opposite. If I'm a negative example, I'm going to trip them up. So there's that. But we only use Tikkun Olam in terms of people on ourselves, or perhaps children or someone that comes for advice, but not generally. We assume the best for others and just try and help them on their way. Yeah. Go ahead.
That process is called Hishtalshalut. That's what the process is called?
No, I'm telling you, that's Tikkun Olam. That's repairing the world. Hishtalshalut is the chain of creative forces that create all the spiritual worlds from the highest to the lowest down to the physical world. That's Seder Hishtalshalut, is how the world is constantly recreated every moment.
But Tikkun Olam then is part of that. Is part of it? I'm just trying to see how it all fits together.
Tikkun Olam is how all the worlds are repaired. But no, Tikkun Olam does not relate directly to Seder Hishtalshalut. Tikkun Olam is the act of repairing what's in the world. Seder Hishtalshalut is how the world is created.
Okay.
Yeah. Paula, did you have something?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm in studying Musar. Okay.
Yeah.
What comes up is that we do have an obligation to correct somebody, and there's ways to do it, and you're supposed to not let whatever their problem is go by unnoticed. And that's contradicting what you're just saying, that we don't fix somebody else.
Okay. So let's make another distinction. Help someone else versus fix someone else. So if I see someone and they have trouble and they're hungry and I have some food, I have an obligation to give them some food. If I see someone and they're angry and honking at me, and I feel like honking back at them, and I have an obligation to not honk back at them and to help them. If I see someone that's fallen down and is injured, I can't just walk by in a hurry. It's my obligation. God put me there to do something and do a reasonable initiative to help them. But if I see somebody doing behavior that I notice is contrary to what I think is proper behavior, there it's not my role to fix them.
Well, Musar disagrees.
Oh, good. Well, there's a lot that Hasidus and Musar disagree on. But
you need to just vote them out.
What's that? Less, I know we might get into touchy topics here, so I'm going to sign off on Facebook, and I want to continue this conversation just in Zoom. I'm curious to hear, Paula, what that is to continue. But for all those folks on Facebook, thanks for joining us. We're going to sign off. If you want to join here in the class, it's a lovely group. I think you'll enjoy it. Please email maya@temple-israel.org. And I am ending live on Facebook right now. And let's stop our recording here.